back to More Than a Game, a podcast dedicated to the Premier League, the A-League and more. Today on the show, the unfortunate ending to Man United's away trip to the King Power. Both Kazoo-sponsored teams lose, while some ex and current England internationals play like a couple of dodgy used cars. I'm Colby, and I'm joined on the pod today by Tommy C and Jesse. Boys, how are we? We'll start with you first, Tommy. We've been chatting just before the pod about the freedoms that are coming up in Victoria, and you're planning on a very frothy weekend. So you're looking forward to that?
Oh yeah, mate. There is going to be some frost going down range on on Friday and Saturday night. That's for sure. I don't think I'm yet at the point where I would line up outside a pub on Thursday night at midnight. I'm keen. I'm just not that keen though.
And speaking of keen for frost, we've also got Jesse joining us, mate. No doubt you'll also. Oh, here he is. I was going to say we're in a Monday pod, so we're in a bit of an unusual zone. Like Sunday, we normally make exceptions for cracking a few tins on the pod, and Jesse's into a hazy IPA or something like that. What have you got there tonight, mate?
I've actually got a bit of a conservative one, although it's the Burley Big Head, the no carbs. So I am looking after myself.
Isn't Burley
ready
like
for the weekend?
Isn't Burley slang for when like you throw up into the ocean?
Oh, jeez.
I guess the two things aren't mutually exclusive.
That's a sign of things to come, and a sign of things to come on the pod this evening, listeners. We've got a big weekend of Premier League to go through, though not many goals until midnight in the midnight kickoffs until the 80th minute. So RIP Goal Rush. We'll talk a little bit about the Ute League and look forward to some of the upcoming FFA Cup derbies, plus a Matildas update and the controversial Newcastle United takeover. But before we get into that, let's kick off with our moments of the week. Jesse, let's start with you, mate.
For me, there was just some cracking goals. When they did come, they were sensational. I had the Leicester Man United game going on one screen. I had Man City Burnley in the other one. And I didn't pay much attention to the City game at all because there was just bangers going in the Leicester Man United game, and it was just a great watch. And that was after watching Liverpool put 5 past Watford. So it was one of those nights where I was sort of like, do I stay up? Do I go all the way? And it was the quality of the goals pushed me over the line, and I had a cracking night and had a few Guinnesses, or Guinai, should I say.
Mm. You definitely should say Guinai. It's the official plural. Tommy, what about yourself, mate?
Mate, speaking of pushing things over the line, being that picnics are about the only thing we can do here in Melbourne meant that our picnic on Saturday meant that I fell asleep 10 minutes into the first game, into the Liverpool game. So didn't watch a lot of football on Saturday night, I've got to be honest, but I did have plenty of catching up to do on Sunday. Like Jesse said, but there was actually quite a bunch of great games on Saturday night. But my moment of the week doesn't come from Saturday night. It actually comes from Germany this time around. Everyone would have probably seen it over the week. Erling Haaland's video balancing the balls on top of each other and then all just bang them into the top left-hand corner. Moment of the week, not because it was a particularly good video, but just because everyone seemed to think it was real.
I was just about to ask that, Tommy. Have we got to the bottom of this? Is it real?
Sorry, what?
I could visibly see a bubble bursting there on your screen then, Jesse.
I was devastated to learn this news.
And look, like it was a cool video, it was a fun video, but I do have to say it did kind of feel like it was from like the early 2000s. Like it was a little bit reminiscent of Ronaldinho, like juggling the ball and banging it against the crossbar. So, and I guess if anything, it was probably cooler that he did it and probably a bit more believable as well.
And is Erling Haaland real? Have we established that?
The man is a cyborg.
Megatron.
Sent from the future.
A transformer. I don't know what he's going to transform into though, like a truck or like a semi-trailer or a dinosaur or something. I don't know.
My favorite Erling Haaland moment of the week, it was the there was just a little clip of him going around where there was a pitch invader, and he just gets around the pitch invader and he's like running up to the crowd with the pitch invader, and they're celebrating like their teammates together who have like just scored. I saw this, and it wasn't until I read the caption that I realized it, because the pitch invader was wearing a Dortmund top and was just celebrating with him, and I'm like, okay, yeah, sure, but it's actually just a pitch invader, and then he sort of just ushers him off the off the pitch. Just thought, well played.
The people's champ. Yeah.
The people's robot, the friendly robot. Jesse, what stood out to you in the wrong way this week?
Danny Rose. Boy be thick. And he's come back. He looks like when you put the fat filter on somebody. And I'm sorry, I don't want to fat shame him.
But you're going to anyway.
Well, he's a Premier League athlete. He's not
athlete.
He's not in this. He's not in the Sky Sports studio talking about the career that he had with a few pundits. He's still playing, and he didn't look like he should still be playing. He looked like he'd been hooked off the bench, and he was meant to be there for just a guest appearance, and he was popped on the left back position, marking Mo Salah, and it was never going to be a good day for him, and it just started terribly and ended terribly. In fact, you could go through all the moments in the game where he made mistakes, but the last one was some of the worst defending you've ever seen on Nico Williams, where he just gives up. He just absolutely gives up and just dives in just off outside the penalty area, and it's just a tap in for Firmino, and he gets an unnecessary 5th goal. So absolutely disgraceful from Danny Rose. Like if I was a Watford fan, I'd be fuming because I know that the whole team had a hard time, but what a liability to have it left back. I mean, he was horrendous.
Jesse, bit of bad defending to go through on the pod today, but you know what it looked like? Mo Salah and friends at Liverpool made Danny Rose look like he was playing in a testimonial or a charity match or something like that, where he's just been parachuted back in and, just to see if he's still got the skills, but, acknowledging that he's not going to be able to move around the park. But you're right. He's a pro footballer. And all I can see out of this is Luke Shaw somewhere just breathing heavy sighs of relief that he's, no longer the target of this fat shaming.
I'd tell you what, boys, if there was one person who was probably pretty happy about Danny Rose's performance, it was Sami Nasri, because he probably took a little bit of heat off of his physique this week.
Yeah, bang on.
Tommy, what about yourself, mate? Own goal?
Look, I think you said this before, Colby, about how it feels like a lot of our moments of the week and own goals could be very interchangeable. And to be honest, I probably could have switched these two around. But this week, my own goal is something a little bit fresh off the press this afternoon on Monday night at the McBulls, one of my favourites. They've announced that they're basically trying to lobby the Campbelltown Council, I think that's who they are, to get a giant bell installed at the Campbelltown Stadium. And this is probably not the...
Tommy, I want your own goal, not your moment of the week, mate. Come on.
Well, like I said, I think I've actually got them around the wrong way.
Is that going to be installed at the bell end?
Oh, mate, that was exactly what I was going to say. That's my own goal. Is that I saw when I logged onto Twitter about 5 minutes before this pod and scrolled down, and I saw that article. Someone had tweeted that the actual the article was from Adelaide, bizarrely, and then directly underneath it, the next 3 tweets were all saying that they should put it at the bell end, and I was like, okay, guys, yep. And Jesse, you make 4 now. People that have made the exact same joke.
I haven't even seen those tweets, and I've made the same joke. What does that say?
I read about this at the end of an article that was also talking about MacBulls, and is coincidentally my own goal about them taking a pro-choice stance on vaccines. They've come out and apparently said they're refusing to take to implement a vaccine mandate, and apparently they've got like 8 or something players. I think we don't really know who they are yet, boys. But basically,
so they're the ones that have been outed as the ones who have like this bit of a problem when it comes to them.
Yeah, allegedly. And they're sort of saying like, yeah, look, we're willing to just like leave this to the players. And they're basically saying they'd rather have 8 unvaxxed players than 8 unhappy players, essentially just telling them what's what. Like, this is a workplace, guys. Come on, you just got to get the shot and get on with it. But it's just such an own goal, because it's essentially like you've got 8 players, or however big the number is, that can't play like a third of the season. Like it's like these players are just going to be injured and unavailable for selection for a big portion of their fixtures. And where this tied into the bell is that they just seem to be turning into the villains of the A-League season already, hoovering up players from other teams, being a little bit accommodating of anti-vaxxers, and putting a big ass fucking bell on the pitch. Like, how more evil could they be?
Just a terrible club.
I still like the bell though.
Let's move on to a bit of A-League news and some listener questions as well. We put the call out for questions, and regular More Than a Game host Shannon got in our mentions and asked us to mention the FFA Cup. So that continues this week with some round of 16 fixtures. Eased COVID restrictions mean that we're able to see some local derbies in the round of 16. So we had Adelaide Olympic, who were able to host Adelaide United on Sunday. Adelaide United went up 1-0 thanks to a goal from Jacob Tratt. And then up in Queensland, we've got Lions FC, who are going to host the Roar this Sunday, with both of those clubs sharing quite a lot of history and heritage, as many will know. And then with the easing of restrictions in New South Wales and Vic, that'll mean that the delayed round of 32 games can be played. And I'll just give you some standout fixtures, boys. We've got South Melbourne hosting Melbourne City on the 12th of November in the McFranchise Derby. Sydney Olympic hosting Sydney FC on the 24th of November. Those are the two that stand out to me. Tommy, I think you and Damo, at least, I don't know about you, Jesse, but you boys are going along to the South Melbourne City game, aren't you?
Very keen to see City go up against the plucky NPL upstart South Melbourne, and a friend of ours as well, a fellow West Ham fan of mate of mine, Anthony. I think the three of us are going to head down hopefully for that. So it should be a good game. Hopefully we'll get around to Suva as well, and good times. And hopefully there'll be some football. Just being at some live football again will be fantastic. Magic of the Cup.
And the Ute League, speaking of our local beloved league, is about a month away now. And Lee Broxham Facts wants our premature table predictions. I think it's going to be incredibly difficult. I've opened up the table, and Adelaide are on top, and Western United are on the bottom. So yeah, look, that's looking pretty good to me.
Brisbane in second, or
they are in second. So I'll take that. Look, I don't know that I can predict an entire ladder this season, but I think we can talk about some general themes. Obviously, we've just mentioned MacArthur. I think they're going to be the villains of the season. The anti-vax hub. We thought that was going to be Western Sydney, might be both. But I think one big theme is going to be the return of Melbourne Victory with Popper. And the players that he's getting in, and we know what he does when he gets into clubs. He just improves the players, and the impact is pretty immediate. And I think he's going to have a big impact at the Victory. I think they'll be in and around the top and challenging. Boys, any other advances on that? Any themes that you think we'll see out of any of the teams? Melbourne City going to continue their dominance, Tommy?
Arguably, I think City are probably the slowest team out of the blocks in terms of recruitment. I think they haven't really replaced Craig Noon or Adrian Luna. He's left as well. Obviously, they brought in Lecky, but I mean, they're two pretty key players that they don't seem to have replaced. So it's going to be interesting to see, I guess, how the next month before the A-League season starts, how I guess all of the squads do go about, finalising their squads. And we've seen a couple of players come in the last few days. I saw Western United signed a experienced Serbian striker, and Western Sydney, they signed a new goalkeeper, Tomas Mayas. A little bit of mayo, a bit of Mayas. Mayas there for everyone, but signed a new goalkeeper, experienced Spanish goalkeeper. So there's still players, I guess, dribbling into the league, no pun intended. But it's exciting, and I guess. Sorry to steal your thunder here, Colby, but in the next couple of weeks we'll be doing our annual A-League season preview pod, which is very exciting. That's when the A-League isn't far away.
That's it. Look out for that one, listeners. And we'll be coming to you if and when we know more about the current A-League season. But I think a lot of this season will depend as well on how we're going with borders being open. It's actually looking, against all odds, like they'll be pretty open from day one, and teams will be able to sort of move around after those initial 6 fixtures. So once the first 6 rounds are done, it's looking like hopefully we should see a pretty mobile comp as we're used to seeing it. So
and stadiums, I think, will have plenty of fans in them too, which no one really wants to, people want to see the A-League back, but an A-League without fans in stadiums, I think, would be a bit just a bit stale. So especially after everyone's seen sort of the Premier League and stuff come back with full stadiums. So I think everyone's pretty keen to getting back to the football again.
We've got Damo in the comments who seems to suggest that there's going to be 3 Melbourne teams finishing top 3. I think Damo's forgetting that one of the Melbourne teams is now coached by John Aloisi, so they're going to be nowhere near the top 3. So not too sure what he's on about there. But
Damo's about to create some Burley in the backyard, I think.
We're remaining to be seen. I think he's probably had a few
not in Melbourne either.
tours.
Wellington's not in Melbourne, so I'm confused.
They're a Sydney FC. This doesn't make any sense, Damo.
Are they in the country at the moment, Jesse? The Knicks? Can we get a Knicks watch?
Mate, I can't keep up. I thought
they were I thought at one point they were going to come over early to avoid some like quarantining, and then they were delaying the trip over. I don't know where they're at.
Yeah,
are they allowed to leave New Zealand?
And then McBalls is pinching our best players and that sort of thing. It's. I'm going to let the dust settle and warm up for the preview, and I'll give us a good next preview then. But at the moment, it just feels like there's too many moving parts to keep up.
Well, speaking of moving parts, let's go with what we do know, and we've got some bits and pieces that have come in this week. So this week, earlier it was announced that Diego Castro has officially left Perth. That was made official, so that's a big move. And he wrote a piece on the PFA website saying he didn't hold any grudges. He still wanted to play there. He was trying to get a deal done, and he's also hoping to still play football. But I think what wasn't written in there was that, he was one of the players that refused to take a pay cut at the start of the pandemic, and then you had Sturridge come in, and so
it's pretty ironic. Like considering he's a communist. So
he was, he's often in the debate as to some of the best A-League imports of all time, usually behind the likes of Tomas Baroš and Milos Nikovic. But we'll take a quick break from the pod, and we'll be right back after this highlights package we've put together from Castro's A-League Championship winning seasons. And now the Woo boys, they're moving to Essendon's headquarters and training facility. Tommy, what do you reckon about this? We were talking about this in the group chat earlier on.
This is pretty fresh, isn't it? I think it's only just been announced this afternoon, but the Woo, they were already posting photos on their socials of them training there this afternoon. So it looks like it's been sort of in train now for a little while, but I guess it's exciting that the Woo have finally got, I guess, some facilities to train at. I think their off-field headquarters is going to move in there as well, which is a little bit weird. I'm not really sure how that's going to work, but I know the youth and the women's sides, they're going to continue playing out of and continue being based out of Caroline Springs, out to the north west of Melbourne. So I guess it's a bit of it's another halfway moment for the Woo, in that they still don't really have a home yet, and they're trying to make things work while they're renting and just trying to make things work in the meantime. But look, they might be breaking ground this month out at Tarneit, so maybe they will have a dug patch of dirt by the end of the season.
Just getting closer to the MCG each year.
I just think they're Tarneit.
Yeah, I thought they were going to be based out of Wooney Ponds. But
look, as long as they're playing west of somewhere, and as long as it's west of any CBD, not necessarily Melbourne CBD, then I think we're okay.
I think they need to do what the NRL teams have done in Sydney, where you just encroach more and more on the centre of the city, so that the original Sydney Roosters, for example, has to become Easts. So Melbourne Victory will end up somewhere deep in Camberwell, and they'll be referred to as East Melbourne Victory.
And like you've got some teams that have gone the other way, like the Roar used to be the Queensland Roar, and now they're the Brisbane Roar, but they're training in the Gold Coast and playing in Redcliffe, north of Brisbane, and just traveling around the regions in pre-season as well. So I mean, give it back to Queensland Roar. Why don't we just come on? Let's just get the A-League just covering the map again.
Just make them all into franchises like the Harlem Globetrotters, and they don't actually have a home ground. No one has a home ground. The Woo did it. Sorry, the Western, the Phoenix did it. Queensland have done it. The way
And
we've
we've
done
got a transfer rumor. I don't know whether this one's settled yet, boys. I might not be up to the minute on Twitter this week, but Jack Rodwell has been strongly rumored to be joining an A-League club. And I read some stats. Someone tweeted that he had 73 minutes in the past 18 months, 56 games played since the 16-17 season, and his well-publicised attitude problems when he refused to leave Sunderland when they were in complete free fall. So have you heard anything about this, or have you got any views about this, Tommy?
Yeah, so this is an interesting thing because I think this is a whole bunch of agent talk, because apparently Jack Rodwell's shacked up with an Aussie girl. I believe I did catch this in a tweet somewhere that it's some ex-NSL player's daughter. So he sort of kept it in sort of football circles kind of thing. But yeah, I believe that he's trying to basically get a gig down here so he can move with his wife or partner or whatever the situation is there, just so that he can, I don't know, get his removals paid for and get settled over here, so that his family can get set up here and he can basically set up here for the long haul. Doesn't really sound like there's football is really high on the top of his priority list, but yeah, it wouldn't surprise me at all if Jack Rodwell does end up signing for an A-League team. I don't think he'll be very good. He'll probably
MacArthur, surely.
Yeah, it wouldn't surprise me.
I don't know. It just feels on trend. I've got a feeling. I've got a feeling about MacArthur this season, boys.
Feeling bullish.
Feeling bullish about them.
So the one thing I remember about Jack Rodwell, sorry, Colby, is that Jack Rodwell went 39 consecutive league games without winning, and I think that cut across. Oh no, it was all at Sunderland, and because I remember there was one crazy stat about him. But yeah, 39 consecutive games. I think they were 39 consecutive starts without a win, which is just unreal. But hopefully, we can continue that at the McBulls.
What a stat. Boys, we didn't mention it on the pod last week, and we mentioned it. Damo and I were chatting after the pod, and we were chatting before the pod on this, but we will mention the Matildas briefly, because obviously over the past couple of weeks we've seen that news surface of allegations of sexual harassment, bullying, grooming, and other serious misbehaviour within the Matildas setup. And it seems like everyone's had a take on this, and we wouldn't be more than a game if we didn't at least just acknowledge it. So Damo and I, as I mentioned, we spoke last week off air when we decided not to include it in the pod. And the reason for that was primarily at first that once you get past the important starting point, which is that the victims, Lisa De Vanna primarily in this case, should always be believed as a starting point. There's just not a lot of facts at this point, and it's clear that a serious investigation is needed. And then there's the matter put out by the current Matildas, the statement that they put out. A lot of people saw this as a bit of a cynical brand protection exercise, but then it's hard to really make comment further than that. So if we put ourselves in the position of the current Matildas, other than coming out more strongly from a starting position of believing the victims, I'm not sure what else they were supposed to do. Like, they can't really admit that their culture's cooked, if it is, or what it was like before they were around. But Tommy, I know you added this to the run sheet, so I just wanted to see whether you wanted to mention this at all or say anything further.
I guess the two things that I think a lot of people looked at this and saw, the two angles that a lot of people saw it from was, I guess, the issues of I guess the individual involved, Lisa De Vanna, and she mentions other people who she saw who were being sort of groomed or abused or along those sort of lines, and that's horrible, and that does, I guess, need to be investigated, and I guess some pretty serious allegations need to be addressed, I guess, by the FA and the Matildas, I guess, generally speaking, but also I guess the other thing, I guess, that sort of is very much secondary to this after player welfare is, I guess, the damage to the Matildas brand that's happening right now. Also, the Matildas were pretty much and quite clearly the number one sort of sporting brand in the country 12 months ago, and that they were going to the World Cup. They were successful at the Olympics, and everyone really gets around them. And it's a shame that, I guess, and really unfortunate that these sorts of things do come out, and I guess that the FA doesn't appear to be sort of saying, "Yep, there is a problem here. We're going to investigate the problem," and it does have this sort of a bit of a sniff of they're sort of pushing it to one side and so forth. So it's I really do hope that they, I guess, peel back the layers and uncover whatever they and deal appropriately with whatever the situation is there, and they can move on and I guess move on together and get back to playing good football together.
Yeah.
Well, onto another pretty light topic, I'd say, boys, is the Newcastle takeover. So that 300 million takeover by Saudi Arabia's public investment fund has been pretty well publicized as well, given the Saudi regime's human rights record and obvious sports washing that's very on trend at the moment. Tommy, did you want to, firstly, before we get into the fun stuff, did you want to talk about the sort of the ethics of this at all? Because there's been a lot that's been said about it already, but did you have a particular take?
Look, I will try not to turn this into a really sort of, I guess, a bit of a downer pod, but maybe if there's one approach that we can take to this is that, Jesse and Colby, I'll throw it to you. If you were a Newcastle fan, and this seems to be something I've seen come up a bunch of times before, would you be able to follow your club or be able to continue to support your club if the Saudis took over them?
I think the issue with this is that it's how many layers of bad guys do you want to go up? So the common fan, and probably including myself, cares about the players out on the pitch, the manager, generally the club, fellow fans. My relationship with the owners is completely limited to hoping that they'll buy new players when we need them, or they'll put more money into funding training facilities in the stadium and that sort of thing. So you don't really have a relationship with the owners. They're a tier above what your relationship is. So generally speaking, fans of Chelsea, fans of City, I'm sure that they've just gone down to continue supporting their club that they did maybe if they supported them 20 years ago, like they did 20 years ago. And I think there is an uncomfortable thing to deal with. I think that City fans would have had this on a different note, but they would have had this as well, where it's not just about the sports washing, but it's also about where the money's coming from. But I generally think that there's a really big issue here with Newcastle, particularly because Newcastle just wanted to get rid of Mike Ashley. So there's this obsession with, we just want to get rid of the bad guy. And
anyone but Mike.
And people can argue that you've replaced it with another bad guy, but it's this weird thing where they were just so consumed about getting that sort of monkey off their back and get them out of the club that they'll take anybody. And that's where I think that if you're asking me if I was a Newcastle fan how I'd feel, I think it's very difficult to call it the way that I think it'd be very, very difficult, because you will go down to the stadium. You'll still be going with your friends. You'll still be going with your family. It will still be Newcastle, but it is going to change. The club will change in the coming years. So, Tommy, I know that's a really weird way to answer the question, but I think it's just like, I guess what I'm saying is I don't really have a relationship with the owner, and I'm sure Newcastle fans don't either. But it's uncomfortable for me. I know that I'd feel incredibly uncomfortable about it if it was Liverpool. If that answers your question, I think that it just would be one of those things where we've all seen what happened in the last few years. I mean, the news with the journalists and things like that, we're not talking a long time ago. This is pretty recent. So it's pretty raw stuff to have in recent history to do with the owners. So it's pretty uncomfortable. What are your thoughts, Colbs?
Yeah, I would agree with what you've said, Jesse. And just one step further, I mean, there's layers of bad guys, and there's just how pervasive this is across not only the Premier League, but across all sport, and just, I mean, across capitalism, across the whole world. It's not, and these guys don't just fund a Premier League team. They're behind the likes of Disney and Uber and all these other brands that we would interact with. And so it's for me, it's a little bit of a case of, where do you draw the line? Like, where do you, as a consumer, as an end consumer, the question is, where do you draw the line about what you will and won't have a relationship with, and what you will and won't participate in? It's for me, it's very difficult. And I think maybe the answer in football, or at least part of it is something like the 50+1 rule they have in Germany with respect to ownership, maybe tighter ownership tests, but it's only part of the solution because it goes so much deeper and so much further. If we're just talking about football, I mean, look at FIFA, like that place just needs to be burnt to the ground and completely rebuilt. You know, you're never going to smoke all of the rats out of that nest, but it's just such a tricky issue. And I think where you ultimately get to as a fan is you just end up extremely compartmentalizing, which I think is sort of what you were saying, Jesse, where, you know, at the end of the day, you know, what you care about as a fan is just like the experience with your mates, with your friends and family, and going to the games and watching the players on the pitch. And that's ultimately what we care about on this podcast. We like to touch on these other issues being more than a game and sort of discussing them. But, you know, there comes a point as well where what can really be done about this by fans. Like, I know, you know, people like to romanticize it and say, well, look, they're the ultimate sort of owners of the club, and they're the ultimate stakeholders and shareholders in a club, and you know, to an extent, yes, but also, like we've seen during COVID, that fans, you know, the game can continue to quite a large extent without fans be necessarily needing to be there. So it's just very, very, very tricky.
I think you can to throw one more thing in there before we move on is that I guess the risk that you can run is that you start to sort of put an asterisk next to anything to do with a particular club or something, and say when something good does happen, sort of on the pitch or even off the pitch, we talked about like building infrastructure or community work and stuff like that, and you go, yeah, that's good, but this, and I think it was the BBC and one, I can't remember which other, might have been Sky in the UK, that they were basically doing that over the weekend, saying, oh, they're going to pump all this money in, but don't forget there's this issue and this big asterisk next to everything that Newcastle will do, basically, which, like you said, that it's not just Newcastle. Newcastle aren't the only club that are involved in sports washing in not just the Premier League, but even down into sort of the second division, the Championship, and other leagues, other top leagues throughout Europe as well. So,
but I think David Squires put it best when he said, who cares about football clubs being used as marketing regimes for murderous regimes when a transfer gossip is afoot? Boys, who do we think they're going to sign? They've apparently got a £200 million war chest, at least according to what they're allowed to spend under FFP. But apparently it's sort of said that they've only got a planned budget of 50 million in January. What are they going to get for that?
I think 150 million.
I think if there's one thing that they've learnt from City and them splurging, it was don't tell everyone how much money you've got, because then everyone knows that you've got a lot of money to spend, and that just means you get ripped off. So I think it's smart to say, oh yeah, we've only got 20 million to spend this window, and then they might surprise a few people with how much money that they do end up spending.
I think they'll vacuum up players like Coutinho and players that are just kind of just gouging clubs that can't afford them anymore. I think that Newcastle will sort of cherry pick some of those kind of players. I think some of the rumors like Sterling is quite a good shout. I think players like that would guaranteed game time, probably the marquee signing. English, I could see that happening.
Imagine Sterling on one side and Saint-Maximin down the other.
I just feel sorry for the fullbacks. You'd be doing a lot of work.
You've got John Joe Shelby just lobbing just bombs from basically next to the centre backs to them both. Boys, I actually heard a great rumor this afternoon was that their first signing may not actually be a player. It could actually end up being a manager. And the three of the names that were rolled out were Roberto Martinez, obviously managing Belgium at the moment, Steven Gerrard, obviously at Rangers, and then finally Unai Emery, who I thought, oh geez, wouldn't that just be hilarious with
Europa League winners 2023.
What the combination I want to see is Unai Emery and John Joe Shelby and Isaac Hayden. That's just, I just want to see that right now.
Press conference. We've had an interesting question from Ash, one of our listeners on Twitter. He asks, given that the Saudis and the PIF have over 300 billion in wealth, if Newcastle were to be relegated this season, would they just take the loss and focus on their sports washing experiment with another club in the EPL or another league like Milan in Serie A?
I think they'll monitor up to January how they're going, and if they're panicking, they'll probably just start splurging. Like, I think people think that they're going to do the classic kind of like, let's just pour the money into the training ground and into the stadium and do all that sort of off the pitch stuff and slowly build and have a project. But I don't think they'll accept relegation. So I think that there'll be a knee jerk reaction in January if they need to. I think they will bring in some big names.
Definitely going to be some improvements, I think, in the squad. Whether or not they signed a Coutinho or a Robinho-like signing in January, yeah, I'm not so sure.
Coming up next, match day 8 of the Premier League. All right, well, United have snatched defeat from the jaws of a draw late at the King Power, with Leicester running out 4-2 winners after a couple of early screamers from both sides. Got a couple of quotes, boys, which I think we could base a bit of discussion around. There was, I'm sure you've probably seen this, but there was a Pogba quote that was going around after the game. He was interviewed and he was pretty frank, actually, about the state of United, saying that we've not found the problem, conceding easy goals, stupid goals, and we need to find something. Jesse, what do they need to find?
A new manager. And while they're at it, try and find a way to play football without an excuse every week, because the excuse is we haven't got a good enough winger. They get Sancho. Oh, we haven't got a good enough centre forward. They get Ronaldo. It's just on and on and on and on. And Carragher went off this week, and he got like a huge amount of backlash. But he just had a go at Keane and Neville and said, you guys keep saying you're not good enough for the league and playing down your chances and saying that you haven't got a good enough squad and you need this and you need your defensive midfielder. On average, most of those players are worth about $50 million each, $50 million pounds, sorry. So you are basically saying that they're not worth that. Well, we could argue that they're not, but that's what you paid for. And so either you've got an absolutely horrendous recruitment team, which granted they probably do, or you basically just try to paper over the cracks for years and years without doing the work that most clubs do, which is build players up and actually creating great players and great defensive midfielders, if that's what you need. So there are a lot of people now, including United fans, not just rival fans, who are just basically, they've just had a gutsful because they're not really going anywhere. They're kind of just treading water. They may well still win a trophy this year through, a cup competition, anything can happen. But in a league, you need to be consistent. And at the moment, they're consistently being awful. So I just think that they need a new manager. I think that he has completely run his course. And people are calling for Conte and things like that. United fans are a little bit conflicted because, yes, he's the kind of manager that could potentially get them a title because that's what he does. But I don't know if long term he'd actually fix the problem. Like, he might actually just do what they've done recently, a few years ago, where they sort of got that surge and then just tumbled back down again. So they've just got to use their academy and actually start developing players without just buying them here and there and not actually helping the squad. So that's my rant on United. Like, I'll get into Harry Maguire shortly, but I'm just sort of sick of the excuses. And I'm not just saying that as a rival fan. I think that there are United fans and friends of mine who had a gutsful as well.
Tommy, who would you go for as manager of United?
I think Conte has all the hallmarks of being Mourinho Mark II. Like, he's going to be somewhat more successful. He's going to be probably going to leave an old squad that's going to be pretty unremarkable, but it's just likely to be successful or marginally successful for a little while and then just turned out to be an absolute mess. So yeah. I don't think that would be a good move. In fact, like, whilst there were some positives about Ole, I think broadly speaking, I think it's just been they probably should have moved on after about 18 months. Once sort of he has done a reasonable job at sort of moving on some of the dead wood, but there's still that centre midfield situation still has never been resolved. Like Fred, Matic, Pogba, and McTominay, still it's never really worked. And Bruno sort of made it work for a little while because he added something different, but still like that double pivot at the back or a single defensive player there still never really worked. On a side note, though, I do have to do a bit of a shout out to Michael Cox. Did a really good article today talking about basically how Ronaldo has basically ruined what was kind of a team that was being built, and you could see what they were doing there, and you could see Greenwood was developing into like a pretty handy footballer. But now with Ronaldo there, and I think we talked about this earlier on in the season about Ronaldo and how he's going to basically kind of ruin their ability to press from the front, and that was exactly what he unpicked, that thread of, and it's they're just really easy to play through now, and they've always been a team that's wanted to sort of sit back, but now they're just really disorganized. And the irony is going to be that Ronaldo is going to be the one that not just ramped up the pressure, but he's going to be the one that's sort of broken this squad and made it, at least with Rashford and Greenwood, they were sort of coherent at least going forward, whereas now, like defensively, they're just terrible.
So there's elements of what you've just said, and I haven't read the article, but there's elements of what you've said that I agree with, which is they're easy to push through because they're not pressing and they're disorganized for sure. But again, excuses. Like, who's behind Ronaldo? You've got Pogba, you've got Bruno Fernandes, you've got all these great players, and they're just like the Harlem Globetrotters who can't actually function together. And it's like, where do the excuses end? I mean, you can say, oh, it's because Ronaldo's the team. That United would give up results like this before Ronaldo was in the team. So I think it's like, I have the same opinion about Harry Maguire, and I'll just cover it now because I might as well. He was getting blamed left, right, and centre about his performances in the weekend and giving away, basically being at fault for most of those goals. And all the excuses were, Ole rushed him back too quickly. He's unfit. It's like, Harry Maguire hasn't just been making mistakes since he had an injury. He's had a horrendous season so far. And on the weekend, he basically just continued the way he was playing before he got injured. So this is what I mean. There's a lot of like scapegoatism and trying to make excuses. And that includes for Ole. And at the end of the day, he has got a great squad of players. And you're watching players who are great in another system like Sancho come across and wilt in this system. That for me tells you that the manager is not doing a good enough job. It's just plain to see. And if this was any other business, any other workplace, you would identify that as a problem. You'd have a trial period, and then you just fire the person. So why is he any different? I just don't get it. I think that it's great for us as rival fans because the United result support. Ole in. I saw a great meme of everybody protecting him. Like everyone was bodyguards and like leave him alone. But yeah, if I was a United fan, I'd be tearing my hair out. Yeah.
And Jesse, you mentioned Harry Maguire, but what about Jadon Sancho? You mentioned him before as well. He's had 10 games so far at United for 0 goals, 0 assists. What have you made about his start to life at United?
Alexis Sancho, he has been just anonymous. He's been anonymous, and like that's how people rated his performance on the weekend. That's the same. They were saying the same thing about Ronaldo, to be fair, on the weekend. But he's just. This is what I mean. This is the system. Like he was great for Dortmund. He's a great player. Great players don't just wilt overnight. He's still got the skills. He's still got the tricks, but he obviously has low confidence. He doesn't know what he's doing, and he's just kind of like a microcosm of that whole team. They've got good players in that team that don't know what they're doing. And that for me suggests that the manager is basically just saying, go out and play. That's unacceptable if you're a team of that caliber.
It reminds me a little bit of like late era Wenger almost. And Wenger was sort of notorious or famous, whichever way you want to look at it, for just saying, oh, look, I've got some great players. They're smart enough. They'll figure it out. And it feels a bit like that with this Solskjaer team, because like we all know there's some fantastic players there, but but it's hard to talk about, or it's hard to point out probably more than maybe two players that Solskjaer has genuinely improved from being either average to excellent or something like that in the last 2 years, 3 years. Maybe Shaw is one, but I think we all knew that Shaw would be a player. He just needed sort of some of the right environment. But
well, and if you look at the opposite too, the opposite is so true. Look at players who come into Pep Guardiola's team, especially in the early reigns, and people give Pep a hard time for managing, the top of the top, but there's no denying that he improves players, and Jurgen Klopp as well. Look at look at Salah. Look at Salah. He came in and people were laughing because he was a Chelsea reject, and he didn't light the world up at Roma. But look at what he's done under Klopp, and there are many other examples and examples of players coming up through the academy and breaking into the first team, and then like Trent Alexander-Arnold and others from that academy. Players that just come in, and there's examples of this right across the team and right across other teams in the Premier League and in other leagues as well. We're talking about Tony Popovic in the A-League. You can tell a good manager, and they do that consistently throughout their career. Ange Postecoglou improves players, improves
players, yeah. And Damo summed it up really well, like just recently where he was saying that he'd read an article or watched something where somebody was mentioning that Ole doesn't really have a plan. Like he doesn't talk about an ethic, or sorry, not ethic, a philosophy. Doesn't have a philosophy, and that's basically like plain to see. He doesn't have a philosophy. So, I mean, the only thing I can explain to explain all this, guys, is that in a plot twist, a huge plot twist, he's actually trapped in his job. He can't leave his contract. He's basically got to get his conservator to let him free, like Free Britney. So essentially, it's essentially it's hashtag Free Ole.
Oh,
it's the only answer.
Good. I like that.
Anyway,
let's move on, boys. We've spent a long enough trashing United. I'm sure there'll be plenty more opportunities throughout the season. But another wild game from this weekend in the Premier League was Villa and Wolves. So I mean, Villa coughed up a 2-0 lead as well, threw away a 2-goal lead in the 79th minute to lose the West Midlands derby to their rivals, Wolves. They've now suffered back-to-back defeats, and Wolves have leapfrogged them in the table. Wolves, meanwhile, have got 4 wins in the last 5. Tommy, how did you see this one playing out?
I mentioned at the top that I didn't catch any of the games on Saturday night, and on Sunday morning I checked the scores and then thought, okay, which games am I going to watch? And then I checked my fantasy team and I saw that Matty Cash, he played 70 minutes and somehow got a clean sheet in a team that lost 3-2. And I went, what the hell? And then I looked a little bit closer and I went, hang on, maybe I'll actually watch this full game. And I'm really glad that I did because Villa were quite good for the first sort of 70 minutes. And I don't really know what it was that changed for Villa. Off. But yeah, well, and obviously Cash, he went off too. But for Wolves...
he was withdrawn, you mean?
That's good.
Catch that.
For Wolves, the big change was Daniel Podence came on, and he seemed to be just basically lighting up the Villa defense. And he was obviously very key. But what I really liked about this Wolves team, and who haven't actually been in particularly good form so far this season, but I'm not sure if anyone caught the Connor Cody reaction after the second goal. Obviously, Connor Cody's the captain at Wolves, and he was just absolutely so revved up. And it was really, really great to see, because you could see sometimes you're not really sure how like sort of the team spirit is at a club that's losing, but you could see that in that moment there was a lot of belief and a really strong team spirit at that Wolves side. And at that point, even though I knew what the score was going to be, you absolutely knew that, yeah, geez, this Wolves team, like they aren't sort of they're not going to be strugglers. They're still going to be thereabouts this season, and that was really encouraging, I guess, knowing that and seeing that team spirit, but also, I guess, they were a little bit lucky in, I guess, how they ended up winning the game through that deflected free kick right at the death. But still, you can see that this is a Wolves team that means business. So
never say never. Right to the death. I was going to say, Tommy, with that game, he took off McGinn. I think he took off Douglas Luiz as well, because he had been a lot of minutes on the international break. So he took a couple players off, and you mentioned Matty Cash. So it just seemed like the midfield, they lost the midfield like almost instantly. It was pretty bad. And even that.
Not just that, but they brought on a really junior player in. I can't remember his first name, but Ramsey. Yeah, and I think he's only like 18 or 19 or something. And so you're playing up against the likes of Joao Moutinho and Neves as well. So
Moutinho,
yes. But yeah, it's obviously it's easy with 2020 hindsight, but obviously it was. The other players that came on for Villa didn't do a great job either, and didn't really set up that young Ramsey lad for success either. So
forget 2020 hindsight. What about 2020 foresight of Aston Villa to hire a set piece coach and then get done by 3 set piece goals to lose 3?
That's exactly what I was going to say, Jesse. That's one thing that stood out to me. It was the 3 goals for Wolves came all shortly after set pieces, or in the second phase after a set piece. And I don't know whether that's necessarily something that Wolves have been practicing, that sort of phase after a set piece, or whether Villa had just switched off and it's something that they need to work on. Maybe it's both. But that definitely stood out to me in this one.
Tuanzebe got really exposed near the end of that game. So yeah, they'll be pretty keen to get I think it's Courtney Horse or House back soon, because
back on the horse.
Yeah, back on the horse.
Back in the house.
All right, boys. Watford, Liverpool. Liverpool dominated this one, romped home to a 5-0 win. It was excellent 9:30 viewing for Jesse and I. Prime time, or would have been 10:30 daylight savings time. But nice early game on a Saturday night. What better? Look, Tommy, I'm gonna throw to you first, because Jesse and I have got views, but this is a completely open question, and don't let the fact that it's Watford Liverpool and we're talking about this game influence you. But who's the best player in the world right now?
You're talking about Klopp just before about him improving players, and I was going to throw out there that this week there has been a lot of chat about Salah being the best player in the world at the moment, and I'll just leave that there. That a lot of people are saying that, and especially I did see that I saw another tweet during the week about how Jorginho won. I think did he win the Ballon d'Or, or is that's not done yet? But he did win.
That's Jesse fan fiction.
Yeah, but that Jorginho would never be fit to clean Busquets' boots, and Busquets never got in the top 20 of the Ballon d'Or voting. So that's just where we are right now in world football. That Salah is not being, thrown out there.
Well, and Ronaldo got FIFA Player of the Month last month as well, which is an absolute robbery.
Ridiculous.
I think that with Salah, I think the reason why right now it feels like it's hitting different, guys, is it's elements of that first season where he was just pulling rabbits out of the hat, and he has been brilliant the last few seasons. Like, he's been consistent. He's pulled us out of holes. He's scored goals and won us games when we probably shouldn't have won them. So he has been a talisman, and he's still been Mo Salah. But one thing he did in that first season, I always remember when we won the Champions League tie away at City, and they were really favoured to win that, and it was him doing the chip over the keeper, and we went all the way to the final that year. And he had this ice cool, lethal finishing. He was scoring all types of goals. He scored a similar goal to what he did the other week against City, against Tottenham a few years ago, where he chopped onto his right and finished as well. So he had that ability back then to just pull something out of nothing. And in the last few years, defenses have got better. They've seemed to be able to usher him into sort of cul-de-sacs and be like, you're not going anywhere now. And he's sort of been nullified a little bit in that regard, and he's got a lot of penalties. But just recently, it's like he's just gone back up another level. And now he's got that supreme confidence that he can get himself out of a tight space. Doesn't matter how many defenders are around him. And not just that, he's basically decided that he can also be a playmaker. And he's now doing inside out, passes to Mane and one touch into the back of the net. So he just made his opposition look so inferior. And I think that's where, that's why he's getting so many raps and he's getting compared to the greats, because this is what people like Messi have done in La Liga for years, is just like made other professional footballers look incredibly average.
Sent
That's what-
Cathcart to Bunnings for a snag and a vax.
Add to Cathcart. Oh shit! Yeah.
Yeah, so 8 games, 7 goals, 4 assists. What a start to the season. He's level with Drogba now for the most Premier League goals by an African player in 89 fewer matches. Jesse, how soon are you re-upping his contract if you're Klopp and if you're Liverpool?
It's interesting because that's what all the talk is now. So, I mean, I know outside of Liverpool that most people are just talking about how well he's playing, but inside Liverpool, it's all about tie this guy down. And I think it's very easy to do that when someone's in hot form. But in FSG and Liverpool are renowned for just taking their time. But it sounds like they're going to have to make an exception in this regard because you just can't have a player playing that well for any club in Europe and not renew their contract at least and give it a hefty upgrade. So they're going to have to do something about it soon because the press is all over it. The press keep asking every game, what about the new contract? What about the new contract? So the pressure will lead to a new contract, surely.
The key for Liverpool is, I guess, milking the most that they can out of Salah, and basically trying to repeat what Chelsea did to Real Madrid with Hazard, where he wasn't finished, but they knew that exactly. And I think that there's maybe a hope that maybe one more year and then we'll sell him for, I don't know, 70 million or something like that. And everyone will think, oh, geez, Real Madrid got such a great deal, but Salah will be finished. And he has played a lot of football in the last few years and remarkably has gone pretty much injury free for a long time as well. So, it's very, very interesting to see what sort of the plan is, because I'm sure there is a plan at Liverpool as far as Salah goes.
At this age, though, it comes down to attitude, and Hazard's a great example where he just didn't look like he wanted it anymore. Whereas, like, you've got someone like Salah, who's in his interviews, he's saying he wants to drag them to win the title. He wants to drag them to win the Champions League, and that's a sign of somebody who's starting to fall into that elite player. Like your Ronaldos and Messis, who they determined to carry their team through tournaments and title wins. So that's if you're a Liverpool fan, that's why you tie that person down for another 4 or 5 years, because you're not expecting this level of performance for another 4 or 5 years, but you've got a player in your team who is determined to win trophies. You've got to keep that guy in your team.
Man, Hazard definitely wanted it. The problem was that it was fries with aioli.
How good are they, though?
Belgian beers and chocolate. Tommy, this was Ranieri's first game in charge at Watford. New Watford manager. All the chat on social media was how fast Watford were going to sack him after this was his biggest ever Premier League defeat in his first home game in charge of Watford. Well, what are your thoughts first on the appointment, and secondly on what the future holds for him at Watford?
Oh, look, I feel for poor Ranieri, but like he doesn't hit everywhere, and this might be a bit of a miss for him. Sometimes the not everything is right at the club, or the squad just is rubbish. And the longer things go on at Watford this season, things aren't looking real great for them. So,
remember he promised the Leicester players to pizza. They could eat pizza if they won or something. Maybe they got lost in translation for Danny Rose. I'm sorry. I said I wasn't going to fat shame. I'm sorry. Anyway, as you were, Tommy.
Tommy, we should move on to your West Ham getting up over Everton 1-0. Tell us about this game.
Yeah, so look, this was on the was it Sunday night game, which it's always tricky for a lot of people to be able to get up and see this one. I didn't get up and see it, but I did see the score. Do you know that West Ham won?
Got up.
Pardon?
Ogbonna, he got up right at the end.
He got up and look, Rondon, he got up as well. He lifted his leg and then prompted to stomp it down on Souček's face as well. So I think Souček needed about 4 or 5 stitches in 2 different gashes. One was on his nose and one was on like his cheek. So
check yourself.
Yeah. Just real Souček areas. Like now he's got the scars to prove that like he's a real hard man of the Premier League. So I think deep down he really liked that he got those scars. But look, I did read that there was a lot of positive feedback about the West Ham performance. Decky Rice again imperious, and helped myself to a fried rice for lunch as a way of sort of paying homage to my boy Decky. But yeah, look, another really great performance. And look, judging from the highlights alone, you'd be this is a match that really could have gone either way, and I think a lot of fans for both teams I think would have been happy with a 1-1. But yeah, West Ham I think probably a little bit lucky, but obviously you've got to finish the chances that you get, and West Ham ended up finishing off one of them. They
secondary West Ham fan over here was watching it on my phone with AirPods in, procrastinating going to sleep. And I probably should have gone to sleep. I did it at half time. But I will say, Tommy, from the first half, because I didn't catch the second half, but the first half, West Ham started so crisply. Like for the first few minutes, they were just, Everton could not get out. They just completely pressed them into the corner. Everton were just doing some terrible passing. Pickford was doing his normal, just turning it over every 2 seconds. And then all of a sudden, Townsend managed to whip a ball into the box, and then all of a sudden Everton believed they could get past the halfway line, and then it's sort of evened up a little bit near the end of the first half. The second half, I didn't catch much of it. I did see the result, but it was interesting. I just think that West Ham, the way they started, they kind of needed to bury the goals then and there. I think it's great they got a set piece goal, but I think what Moyes will be working on will surely be more clinical and ruthless, because they have been clinical and ruthless so far this season. They were a little bit bereft of that in the first half, where they probably should have scored a goal in the first half.
An important question, boys. Are we dropping Antonio from our fantasy teams? You got to give me the inside word.
I blew up my fantasy team about a month ago trying to squeeze Lukaku and Ronaldo in, and yeah, my team's pretty much fucked now. So I would go for Antonio again if you can. Just don't have
Eggplant FC.
Well, West Ham are now sitting in 7th, ahead of Everton on goal difference, both on 14 points. So it'll be an interesting race between those two this season, and they're hot on the heels of United, also on 14 points. So still very, very tight in the middle of the Premier League. Newcastle, we spoke about their new ownership. That regime got off to a losing start, unfortunately, hosting Tottenham. They lost 2-3. Tottenham, who are sitting on 5th with a goal difference of -3, which, how the fuck do you do that? Things that stood out to me in this game, boys, Callum Wilson's header to open the game was delicious. Kane's first Premier League goal of the season, faffed around for a bit with the offside, but it was a nice little goal as well. Shelvey with the red card, and then Eric Dyer own goal under what looked to be not much pressure. Is that how you saw the match playing out there, Jesse?
Yeah, but I mean, there's conventional pressure, and then there's Eric Dyer pressure.
Pressure puts on himself.
Yeah.
Just want to have a shout out to Harry Kane, who he seems to have lifted the August curse this year, but couldn't seem to get past the September curse, and almost fell foul to the October curse as well. But look, he has managed to get off the mark on the 16th of October. So good for him.
And the billionaire Burnley got up 1-0 over Brentford at home. Cementing their excellent defensive record this season. They've still only conceded 3 goals in 8 games, so that's
cemented Mendy's excellent defensive record.
Yeah, I mean, he really bailed them out in this game. Just making save.
Got a stat for you guys. Damo's not here today, so I thought I'd provide one. So, according to Transfermarkt, which this is where the guy on a certain tweet got the stat from. In the 27 Premier League games that Tuchel's been in charge, 7 goals have been scored over 5 games. So in 22 out of the 27 games, the striker has blanked. So I'm talking about strikers here. So he's basically saying that whoever's been up front, whether that be Lukaku, and obviously he only came in from game week 2 this year, match day 2 this year, he's basically, out of those 27 games, there's only been like 22 of them the striker has blanked. So he's actually been the club itself has been relying on goals from defenders and from like centre backs and things like that. Like it's actually quite intriguing how ineffective the centre forward's been for Tuchel since he started. Yet Chelsea is still top of the league. I thought that was really interesting.
With a tasty goal difference too. So they're clearly doing something right, and Lukaku looks like he is the right fit there. And they've got enough talent around him. I think Tuchel will get the best out of him, and will get the best out of the Germans as well. And I mean, it's hard to see. I mean, Liverpool and City have just got to do their best to keep pace with them this season, I think.
And the other stat I had was in Burmo, or I think it's in Burmo. He's hit the post 6 times this season already, apparently. So the man can find the woodwork. So you felt a bit sorry for him actually in this game, because he put himself in great positions, but just found the bar every time.
Yeah, I think he's on the way to Brighton next season.
Yeah. Graham Potter's like, he just heard the sound and went, "What was that?" And someone hitting the post. Oh, sign him up.
Imagine Mbeumo and Trossard in the same team, just rattling the post. Southampton leads. The Southampton got up 1-0. Not going to mention that. We've just whipping through some other results now. Norwich and Brighton 0-0.
Can we talk about Norwich missing an open goal?
They're just absolutely cursed. What have they got to do? What have they got to do?
Go back to the championship.
It's like it's like he thought he was on the fairway and he hit the rough. He's hit the ball and it's just come to a ground inside. How about Duffy with the unnecessary slide dive? He's still, the ball's basically stopped. It's not going in, and Duffy decides to be the hero and slides in and clears it. A little bit unnecessary.
It's the courtesy slide.
But you got to
courtesy dive from the goalkeeper.
It is. You got to feel for Norwich though. I mean, like that was their moment. Like open goal. It just sums up their season.
And Brighton somehow still in 4th. So, I mean, despite draws in the last 3, they're clearly doing something right. It's just such an odd position to see them in. And Norwich really, yeah, you're right, Jesse. They could have and should have made the difference there and lifted themselves off the bottom. But as it stands, Brighton are in 4th and Norwich are bolted to the bottom of the table in 20th with 2 points.
Potter's been focusing on potions and defense of the dark arts.
Yep. Manchester City, business as usual over Burnley, 2-0. There was no other result there other than maybe a 3-0 to City. Zach Steffen, the US international, got his first, or no, not his first, but he got a game for City with Edison coming back from South America. I mean, do you have anything to say about this game, boys? It looked absolutely BAU to me.
City were flat. They were really flat. Yeah, and I had Murray as my fantasy team, so I was watching what he was doing, and it wasn't a lot. And when he did do it, he hit the bar or missed, and then he lost his confidence, so he just started doing sideways passes for the rest of the game. And that actually summed up most of the team. Like even Foden, who's just been probably the most confident player in that team coming up to this game, got to a point about the 70-minute mark where he's just like, I don't really feel like dribbling anymore. And they just kind of just went through the motions for the last 20 minutes of the game. I guess they're focusing on the Champions League midweek now. So it just, City really, I mean, even the crowd was super flat after the second half.
This was a game that I felt like had been years in the planning for Sean Dyche, because he'd been building basically a squad that didn't have any South Americans in it, purely for the fact that they wouldn't be then going away and getting stuck in hotel quarantine while in the sort of the post-COVID world. So, look, really disappointed for Sean Dyche that didn't get the result that he was after obviously, just unsurprisingly unaffected by any of the South Americans getting caught in hotel quarantine.
They had chances though, Burnley, and Dyche did say after the game that, if they were better at taking those rare chances, albeit, they'd upset a few teams, but they had a couple of chances and snatched them, including Mr. Wood, unfortunately. But I think he's offside.
Are we renaming them Spurnley? Spurning chances. It reminded me of
tell me Turf more.
It reminded me of that South Park episode, like Stan Darsh. Good one, Spurnley.
Sean Dyche.
Still to come this week, we've got Arsenal for Palace overnight tonight. By the time you're listening to this, you'll know the result, but we don't know the result now. I was having a look at the record. Arsenal have got not the best record against Palace, and Palace have got a decent record against Arsenal. So, Tommy, how do you see this one going?
Oh, look, I just want to have a shout out for Jesse here. This is, I think, your favourite fixture, isn't it? Ask Cry.
No, it's the reverse. Cry ass. No, sorry.
I thought you were a new ass fan, Jesse.
Yeah, no, new ass is good as well.
But look, really interesting battle of the two the iconic two ex Arsenal captains in Vieira versus Arteta here. Arteta's Arsenal have had a pretty good sort of rebound after a bit of a tough start to the season, and no one really knows what to expect still from Palace. I think they can show up some days and be good, can just be shit other days. So it will be, I guess, a bit of a curious game. I'm not expecting it to be high scoring though. I could see this one being a bit dour, maybe one, max 2 goals in it though. I'm going 1-1.
Typically, that's how this fixture unfolds. But what happens with Vieira in charge? That's the question mark for me. It doesn't scream like a game where Palace are just going to completely capsize like they may have previous years. Like I kind of feel like this is going to be a tasty one, and Palace might even steal it. I'm going to say 2-1.
He just won't
Palace.
celebrate when they score, will he? He'll just do the karma, like.
Yeah, I'm going to say 2-1.
Yeah.
2-1 Palace.
Oh yeah, I think Palace could. I think Palace could nick it as well. Although you're right, Tommy. Arsenal have been in pretty decent form relative to their past standards recently. With they've got 3 in their last 5, so not looking too bad. But Arsenal in 13th, Palace in 14th, 3 points separates them. Palace, depending on the scores, could jump ahead of Arsenal on goal difference if they get up here. So, important game for Palace, and might be a decent one to watch. So we'll see how that goes in the next couple of days. But that's going to do it for us tonight. Boys and everybody, thank you for listening. If you've enjoyed the show today, you can support us by letting us know. Get into our DMs, gas us up on social media, give us a follow on Twitter or Facebook, or subscribe to our YouTube channel for the video version of this pod, which comes out a couple of days before the audio version that you might be listening to now comes out, and we'll link to all of those in the show notes. Next week, match day 9 of the Premier League and the Champions League group stage continues. Till then, enjoy the football.